Hi guys, Morphy here. I'm here today with my co-host Lilith Liberated, and with the folks from the Atheist Couples Devotional Podcast. Now, last week I had Brady Hardin, and I'd recently listened to an episode of his podcast where he had a couple who had deconstructed together and stayed together, and we all know about couples counselling and all this sort of stuff. The whole premise of this podcast seems to be completely the opposite of that. It seems like something designed to wreck marriages. So I'm just wondering, can you tell us more about the premise and why it's not going to cause the divorce courts to be stuffed up?
Well, I mean, we're already deconstructed. We've been atheists for a long time, and we had very different experiences as Christians growing up, but there were a lot of similarities too. But we just really enjoy learning more about things, and it's hard to argue with Christians or make points if you don't know the Bible, and they usually don't know the Bible very well, is what we found. And so we were like, let's just read it all the way through. I
listen to podcasts quite a bit, and I turned Crystal on to like one or two podcasts. She doesn't listen to very many, and I've always been like, I want to make a podcast. And so a couple of years ago, we were just sitting there. I don't remember exactly what I was looking at or reading, but I remember thinking, it'd be really interesting to have like a Bible that's actually gone through. And you know how you have the apologetics on the bottom as footnotes or whatever. And but having a Bible that was actually read through by atheists, maybe a community of atheists or whoever, and then putting notes below in the margins, with their own thoughts of it. So I thought about like an atheist Bible that had that. And then Crystal had the idea, spinning off of that, of making a podcast where we did this. And so that happened a couple years ago. We actually recorded 1 or 2 episodes, but they ended up being like an hour and a half long or something each, and they were not very well formatted, like the way we're doing it. They kind of were like way too scholarly, at least are like trying to be scholarly, and we're not biblical scholars. We're both just love to learn type people, and so that's kind of where it came from. So
that's awesome. Have you got a copy of the Skeptic's Bible by any chance?
No, that sounds fascinating.
Because that's actually a Bible that is like the one you described with with skeptical, but also scholarly skeptical notes, like this isn't original, this is only found in that copy at the whatever, footnotes and end notes about different stuff that you wouldn't necessarily even notice in the text.
Okay.
And also some stuff that you would, and it's like, this is a reference to this other thing over here. So that helps. Also, are you looking at this more from, do you cover things like potential authorship issues, documentary hypothesis, that kind of thing? Or are you going more for what the fuck?
What the fuck?
Yeah,
absolutely. We wanted to this time read it as we didn't want to bring in like we've got to do all these hours of research for everything. We really wanted to structure it like a devotional, and if people who are familiar with Christianity will know that where you read a little bit of the Bible every day and you take a message from it. There's all those couples devotionals that are like, it'll strengthen your marriage to read the Bible together and pray together. And so so we wanted to make it a less formal aspect. And we do include like, pointing out science and historical flaws. The first few episodes, we cover a lot of like comparative lit, other mythologies and stuff. But no, mostly it's what the fuck.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that.
A lot more as we go along.
Yeah, just like every chapter, I think we're both just like, this one's not going to be as bad. And no, it just continues to be like, what is going on? And yeah, I think there's, I've also been reading along with it, Isaac Asimov's kind of history of the Bible. So he goes through and he has a book. And so like I'll read the text and I'll go back and read his portion. And so it gives me a bit more context on that. But I haven't been bringing that up as like a full thing to talk about exactly. But yeah, I've realized now, there's a lot of things I could bring up about that. But there's also just so many people that take the Bible for, face value. And we want to kind of examine that from the fact that this is what people believe. They don't think about this historical things or the fact that the authorship is, actually 5 people for just the book of Genesis. And also just thinking about the fact that the people, of course, the Restoration or the Reformation, people started to want to be able to read the Bible themselves, but they are still now relying on their pastors to kind of deconstruct every passage and not really reading it for themselves. There's so many things that we've come across where it's like, yeah, I heard that in passing, but it was never harped on or focused on, right? They always go for those quote mining.
So, as a lifelong atheist, I don't really know the Bible very well. I've got a skeptic annotated copy, as Lilith suggested, but I only ever read the skeptic notes, not the actual text of the Bible, because I find it so incredibly hard to read. So, yeah, that's why I asked Lilith to come along, because she knows the Bible absolutely inside out. I know a lot about...
brought in when someone needs to rapid fire the Bible at a Christian until they're dazed while someone else gets something.
Nice.
I know a lot about how it's been put together because, for example, I've read things like Proving History, and I've read all of the David Fitzgerald stuff and all that sort of stuff, and they talk about how it's put together and how nobody knows who most of the authors are and all this sort of stuff. And I know enough to tweet, that the Bible says the earth is flat, bats are birds, man had strength in his hair and all that sort of stuff. So I can sort of check
4 legs.
yes, all those sorts of things. And that's it. But whenever I need somebody who's more expert in the Bible and what's in there, Lilith is my sort of go-to person. So one thing I'm interested in about your story is you both deconstructed, but when you were deconstructing, did you deconstruct at the same rate? No. And what issues did that cause?
So neither of us were Christian when we met. I had really struggled. My degree's in anthropology, and I had been able to, apologetics my way through the science part of Christianity, but it was the cultural stuff and like how is everybody wrong? I mean, there are thousands of religions that have existed through time, and so I believed in something at the time. And I wasn't sure what, I guess I was kind of an atheist. didn't really care for a while.
Some sort of a something somewhere.
Yeah. And Michael was an atheist. Sorry, guys. We have a delivery or something. Michael.
There's someone knocking on our neighbor's door. So
boys, stop.
That's Darwin and Franklin.
Yes.
Proper atheist dog names.
Hey, guys, stop. Michael was an atheist, but he wasn't out as an atheist when we met. And that... Are we quiet now?
Well, I'm afraid that if we're going to explain that, then it's going to ruin the recording.
All right, I think we're good.
Okay.
Yeah, Michael wasn't out as an atheist. And in fact, I almost didn't pursue a relationship because his Facebook religious beliefs said follower of Christ, not even Christian, follower of Christ. Okay.
Yeah.
And that caused some issues because he was still pressured into going to church, and we could only see each other on the weekends until he just stopped going.
Yeah. So as many people do, I moved away to college after being immersed in a pretty fundamentalist type setting. And once I got to college, I began to question, why certain things were being done within the church. I grew up in a church, a certain type of sect that didn't believe in even having instruments within the church. Yeah. And the only reason why you should get divorced is if someone committed adultery.
Sometimes maybe.
Right, yeah, and really, you should really go to the elders and talk to them first, and really try to work it out first.
Were you allowed to at least have like a tuning fork or one of those?
Yes,
just to get you on, because if you don't start people on key, oh my lord!
But of course, it doesn't stay on key, But yes, they were allowed to have the pitch pipe. In fact, I used to have one somewhere around here, and yeah, it was that bad. You're exactly right. But there were still people who even complained about that, who would be like, "Oh, we shouldn't even allow that," and no clapping, no anything like that. Very just so terrible.
My parents grew up in the same sect as Michael. They'd kind of left that mostly by the time I was born, but.
By the way, it's the Church of Christ. We're knocking around it. In fact, usually we call them COCs, just for short, COC.
I have a feeling they've earned that epithet.
Absolutely. But my mom told me she saw churches split over whether or not hand clapping was allowed,
or whether or not, get this, whether or not there should be like a kitchen within the church building. That was a big argument.
Potlucks are half the reason to have a church.
Tell me, and I tell them all the time. I was, the one church we went to that was Church of Christ that had the kitchen. I have way more fond memories of that place versus the one where they were, bigger, but they were and had more kids and stuff. And yeah, it was terrible. So yeah, I went to college. Started questioning stuff. Took biology classes. Started really questioning things, and then I actually moved back home to my conservative town. Got bored, didn't have the internet, and went up to the library, as people do. And I got Stephen Hawking's, one of Stephen Hawking's book. I'm trying to even remember which one it was now. A Brief History of Time. Thank you. And read that, and that really helped me to kind of sort some things out of my head a bit more, and still have more questions though. And from then on, I was kind of hooked on just the skepticism in general. And then I started browsing the atheist subreddit with, looking over my shoulder, make sure no one was seeing me on there. Yeah. And I became a bit more militant of an atheist, in my atheism. And of course, I was definitely faking it for a while because I was living at my grandmom's house. My grandmom and granddad raised me. My grandmom raised me. And so living there, I wanted to appease her because I was living there rent-free, of course, and I was still in my early 20s. And so I went to church, zoned out most of the time, but, enjoyed the social aspect.
Yeah, I do miss a lot of my friends from church. Although what you said about Stephen Hawking, it reminds me of something Christopher Hitchens would often say in his debates, which was, take a page of Stephen Hawking about the black hole and the theoretical lip over which one could plunge and see the past, the present, and the future, except that you would, of course, not have enough time, ironically enough. And
as you're spaghettified.
Yeah, and I'll be amazed if you can still go on gaping at a burning bush.
Yeah.
And it's funny because a lot of people think that, it's very dry and miserable to just take science instead of, religious hoopty-hop, but it's you give up this kind of imaginative gloriousness, and then you find out there's way more in reality than you ever had in your fantasy land.
So much more wonderful and unfathomable to try to understand the actual universe than to just be like, some dude snapped his fingers and
whoop-de-doo. So just to clarify, you were both raised young Earth creationists.
No, I was not. By the time I was mostly left to explore whatever I wanted to believe. In my formative years, we started going to a Methodist church, and it was a pretty progressive church. I always say they didn't preach anything that could be controversial. Like, it was all, love your neighbor, be faithful, and the first openly trans woman that I knew came out there, and the pastor, who was highly educated, he had a doctorate, which is very in theology, which is very rare in Texas. And he was like, of course you're welcome. That's what we believe. God loves everybody. And so my mom never really talked about her beliefs with me. Like, I had to sit her down when I was a teenager, be like, I don't know what you believe. Please tell me. And she's like, I believe Jesus was a good person. So no, I was not at all a young earth creationist. And I was always what would be called in like a progressive Christian camp. And I left when the Methodist Church is very hierarchical, and they forced my pastor to retire and my senior year of high school, and brought in this guy, and the last straw was he basically said, don't let the door hit your ass on the way out, to our trans member. And after like a whole bunch of other stuff, started bringing politics into the pulpit, I was out. So
yeah, no kidding. It sounds like they ruined a really good church, because although I really have no tolerance for faith, I do understand the value of community and it was potlucks, like we were saying.
Yeah, I have really until that year nothing but fond memories of church. I had a very, very positive experience as a Christian, and so in that way our stories are very different.
Yeah, and I did grow up in the literal, young creation faith, and just to clarify, her mom actually grew up in the same in Church of Christ. So she and I she'll be like, oh, do you remember that thing? And it's like, wow, they really haven't changed anything. So they really kind of have their own.
Well, they did stop burning crosses at summer camp. They did that in the 70s.
Yeah, that's good. Which is really sad, actually. That would have been fun at the bonfire.
Everyone bring marshmallows for the Jesus barbecue. Is that it?
Yeah, I mean, one giant marshmallow on a cross.
Jesus, it's summer camp.
So we were so conservative that people frowned upon people wearing crosses like as necklaces and stuff. It's crazy. So fun stuff. So what about you guys? So you weren't Lilith. You were a member, and then.
I had sort of an eclectic, my parents started off when I was born, they were very evangelical vineyardy types. So we're very unrestrictive because we clap and play modern instruments. But of course, we're just as restrictive with everything that matters as the Cox are. Like, we raise our hands when we worship. So obviously we're totally new and fresh and unencumbered and moved by the Spirit. Even though we, still have this horrible hierarchical authority system. And the problem was that I was sat down at a very, very young age and taught about that system of authority, and that was how the universe is. And that you had to submit to the authority of elders over you and blah, 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 blah. And then, like I said, my parents, I think, knew there were ways that could be abused. So I didn't get molested. But on the other hand, I wasn't allowed to have any secrets. So that felt weird. And then they moved to more reasonable positions. I moved with them, but then I was a teenager and, all zealous and everything. And it took a lot of years of investigation to realize there's no baby in the bathwater.
Yep.
Yeah, for me, I kind of, I suppose 6 or 7 years old, my parents were not particularly religious. My mum was a sort of believer. And I used to be packed off to Sunday school. I guess so that the parents could have some time without me. And
macaroni crafts.
Yeah. But I was really, even as a very young kid, into science, and I had lots of astronomy books, I guess, when I was, 5, 6, 7 years old. And the sort of stuff that they told me at Sunday school did not mesh with what I was reading in my science books. And I just thought, these people are talking crap. I mean, they were very nice people, but, it was fairly clear that they weren't that smart. And so I just didn't believe what they were saying compared to what I was reading in science books, which was written by people who I did consider to be smart. So I never believed it. And I was never particularly an outspoken atheist, though, because actually a lot of the influences that I had from people who were religious were good in my early life. I grew up in a very, very rough area. A lot of people who I went to school with ended up in crime and stuff like that. And I guess I got out of that through sport, playing sport. And most of the sport I went and played with a friend of mine who was actually a Christian. And he was, I forget which particular sect, but he never once preached to me, never once tried to convert me, knew what my views were, but we were just mates. He was a couple of years older, so he had transport, and we used to go and play sport, and it got me out of that rough area and into education. And, so I had a lot to be thankful for. And it's just more recently that I've come across so many of these damaging, overt messages that are given to kids, outright lies that are being told to them, and it just got my back up, and that's why I do what I do now. Just yesterday, I was actually sitting in a talk, because, as happens in my real life, I get invited along to all sorts of assemblies and things like that, and I speak to various educational institutions, and I was sitting at an assembly, and a guy was giving a very good talk on self-respect and how people should treat each other and all this sort of stuff. It was excellent. And then he said, "After all, God made us all." And I'm like, that is just a totally unfounded assertion. It had no place in this talk whatsoever. What the fuck are you on about? And fortunately, I think most of the audience just rolled their eyes at him when he said that.
Well, I hope so, and that's good, because I don't know why the existence of God is supposed to make people be less of a dick. Doesn't seem to have that effect in real life.
No, I saw this wonderful video yesterday on Facebook. All these people and I think it was in Texas, going to complain about face masks.
That was Palm Beach, Florida.
Florida.
Okay. We don't claim them. No. There's idiots here too, but we haven't had it at our city council meeting.
Rural Texas in swamps on meth.
Yeah.
And the gators are on meth too, apparently.
Yes, the meth gators now.
Meth everywhere. It's just sort of dusted across the state.
I apologize for my misinformation.
But I saw we might have seen the same video. There was a woman that was like, God's breathing system that you're turning.
Oh, that's the one. I couldn't believe it.
Like, am I supposed to be holding my breath while I'm wearing a mask? I must be doing it wrong. So I can still breathe.
I wasn't under the impression that we were performing surgery and removing people's lungs because we put a tissue in front of them. You have to be in Florida to say something that dumb, because you have to be somewhere where there's never been a winter. Mm-hmm. Let me tell you something. I have had many a head and face scarf, and I'm not Muslim. I'm part of the religion of what I don't want my freaking ears to freeze off, okay?
Is there anything worse than a cold nose? No.
Oh, it burns. Well, maybe cold ears when they're coming back and they're all tingly. It's just...
But Lilith, Lilith, do you not want your ears to freeze off because it's part of God's hearing system?
No, God... I don't go to God for upgrades on my system. He fucked everything up the first time. I'm not really
Doctor Who plot, like the Cybermen. Go get your upgrades.
Well, we could if he had given us the eyes of, say, cephalopods and squid and things. We would have much better eyes. We wouldn't be able to see the veins on the back of our eyes.
It's true. It's a terrible design, the whole thing.
Ooh, I had a question earlier I forgot to ask in your Bible study. Have you got to the part yet where King David buys his first wife with a bag of dicks?
No. The
I remember that one though.
Yes.
I remember that one though.
I love that. Have you seen the Awkward Moments Children's Bible?
No. I read that.
It's glorious, and it's made like a children's Bible with all the pretty pictures, and it picks the most disturbing parts. And so there's a whole page that with like bloody foreskins, and it's
what do you even do with 200 foreskins? I mean, Saul was fucked up asking for 100, but then he was supposed to be crazy because God sent a demon to fuck with his head because God's an asshole. But David was the one who went overboard and bought 200. What the hell? What do you do with that?
Well, I mean, my thought was whenever whenever God made the pact with Abraham to do the circumcisions, that I was like, I guess God just really wants like to deep fry some calamari, peanut calamari.
God, calamari? I was thinking they'd be like elastic.
Yeah, well, that'd be good too, like a scrunchie, like a hair scrunchie.
Oh.
There's so many things you could do with them.
The Morph Show is not this kind of show. This is family friendly stuff.
Sorry, Morph. It's just the Bible. It's
It's in the Bible. Yeah, it's got to be family friendly, right? We are recording our last episode of Genesis this afternoon. So we're going to finish up Joseph's story. But yeah, we've been Abraham, Isaac, Esau.
Second to last, right?
No, this is our last one. 43, 50.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
So, no, second to last. You're right. I'm sorry. And so yeah, we're almost finished with Genesis, and it's been a ride. I get more atheist with every chapter that we read.
I can certainly understand that.
So the question that struck me straight away as soon as I saw, what your premise was for your podcast was, so the couples that you're going to get to read the Bible together, are you thinking atheist couples? Are you thinking Christian couples? Are you thinking either? Or, this is the big question, how are you going to choose your victims, subjects?
So at the moment, it's just us. It's just us reading through it, and mostly our take on it. We might eventually have some other. We actually have another atheist couple that we know that are good friends of ours. So we might have them come in and talk with us, and just kind of see their take, their different flavor of atheism. But yeah, mostly it's just us reading through it right now. And we're wanting to maybe do some interviews with, just special kind of shows, or, with someone like Lilith, who is more of an expert on the Bible, etc., just to see what their take is. But that's
in fairness, I'm not an expert on my own right. I just spend a lot of time listening to experts, and also memorized most of it because I was a very devoted child. So
understandable. Yeah. So, but even, getting people like, I think it's Earlman. Is that the gentleman?
Bart Ehrman?
Right. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah. He's great.
Yeah. So,
when we get famous.
It would be a dream or whoever, but, at the moment it's mostly just us trying to kind of get that knowledge into us again, kind of reflect on where we're at now that we're not Christians and we've been out of it. And it's been a crazy ride so far for us still. So
I think Brady Harding, who I had on last week, he's got a Bible degree. He might be an interesting person for you to approach. Okay. He's got his own podcast called The Life After. And they've been going for a few seasons now, but he knows a lot of stuff. He's got a Bible degree. He might be an interesting person to speak to.
Digital Lobby is good too. There are a couple of Sumerian anthropologists as well, so they have a lot of that background knowledge of basically all the cultures that the Bible ripped off to be the Bible.
Right, and that's actually one that as soon as I saw him on Twitter, I told Crystal, I was like, hey, we have this couple who are Sumerian experts, right? And I was like, we should see about maybe getting them on, because we had just covered, all the early stories where Noah and actually I'd recently read that the story where Jacob dreams about the the ladder with angels going up and down, or whatever. The
Ebenezer, yeah, the stone. God is in this place where he's when he sleeps between being kicked out of his family and making it to Laban to.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
When he's going up to Laban. Yeah, so I'd read just kind of other studies that maybe that was a ziggurat, and with that being some sort of Sumerian or Babylonian structure, just would be an interesting thing to talk with him about. And so, yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, and we'd actually seen them. So
cool.
Are you convinced the Sumerians actually existed? Because didn't they predate the creation of the universe?
I read a very funny forward passing around with the Sumerians' take on God creating the Garden of Eden, and now they're like, this is ridiculous. This is terrible work. These people don't know anything. They're running around naked. They don't have any understanding of anything. They're illiterate. What are you doing? They're already sitting here with, towers and writing and glue and schools. And they're like, what the hell is this? What are you up to, Yahweh? Stop it. Stop smoking the burning bush.
Yeah. It's
Sorry, it seems to me that I actually, from your bio on Twitter, I got the wrong impression. I thought you were actually going to get people to read the Bible together and see what happens.
Yeah.
We are the atheist couple. Yeah.
Okay. And I thought you were just going to get a couple of Christians, typical Christians who've got no idea what's in the Bible, to actually read it together and see what happens.
And that would that might plug up the divorce courts. Holy cow! Why don't you read the end of Judges together and see if you don't murder each other after that? Yeah, don't let your children read the end of Judges. Don't ever do that. Just everyone.
So I'm just giving you an idea for a new podcast.
Yeah, that'll be the next.
Thank you for the idea.
The first time I tried to read through the Bible, because of course I did, and I loved to read, and it was the Bible, so of course you would, and I'm a little bit traumatized still, quite frankly.
Yeah.
It's a dark book, and I feel like everything that I learned is wrong. Like, all of the decent humans are not the ones that God favors. Like,
no.
Abraham, huge dick. Isaac, huge dick. Jacob, so manipulative, huge dick. I mean, it just all they were really
goes with the worst people ever.
I mean, Yahweh is such a bro dude, and he picks the bro dudes.
He does pick the bro, and even the ones who are in his favor and then they lose his favor. Do you know why Saul wasn't king anymore? Do you know what God got so pissed off at him for? God said, "Go destroy everyone in that town and everything." And Saul destroyed almost everyone. He left a few women and children alive, and there were a few cattle that he was going to kill tomorrow as an offering, so there was a delay on that. So he didn't quite kill all the women and children and kept the king as a hostage, because that's typical of the time. So for that reason, God had him demoted and sent a demon to make him crazy. Because you didn't kill all the women and children. How dare you, you bastard.
But God's loving, Lilith. God is loving.
So merciful. Or the story of Jacob and Esau, right? I mean, we just did that one, so that one's fresh in my mind. He manipulated the hell out of his brother, and he took his brother's blessing, and he manipulated him into giving up his rights as firstborn. And but Jacob is the good guy that becomes Israel because he wrestles with God in a really homoerotic scene. It's very weird.
From what I understand from cultural and linguistic experts, touching his hip is it's a euphemism for a crotch shot. Basically, God couldn't beat Jacob, so he kicked him in the nuts.
Oh my.
That's quite sturdy.
How bro
Well, then
is
there's the
that?
whole. That is awesome. I think my biggest revelation so far is that the serpent in the Garden of Eden actually was the one telling the truth. That they
Oh, he's the only
wouldn't-
character in the whole thing who doesn't lie. So obviously he's the devil.
right? And it was like, but you won't die from eating from the tree of knowledge. If you eat it from the tree of life or whatever, you'll get eternal life. But no, I mean, he was telling the truth, and God was like, oh, but I didn't want you to eat from that. And I'm like,
And God said, on the day you eat thereof, you will surely die. 900 years later.
Yep. Just all the inconsistencies. Like one it seems small, but it's like, why would God tell us this, or why would the writer, if it's inspired, that the life of people is going to be cut off at 120 years, and we just read a passage where I think Isaac.
Dies at
No,
100.
Israel or Jacob dies at like 160. Like, so we're still seeing people who aren't dying. So it's just like this simple thing of like, people aren't going to live as long, or it's just bullshit.
All of
As
the
you
bullshit.
know.
Yeah, totally. Oh, yeah. I can't even. Sometimes I look back at that and I'm like, hey, you know what it is? It's got more murder, rape, incest, treason, betrayal, and war than Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
And
we said that in an episode.
Writing than Twilight.
Yeah. It makes E.L. James look like an amazing author.
Oh,
Yeah.
fucking Shakespeare up in there.
Yeah.
Why is God such a crap author in addition to being such a douchebag?
Yeah, well, like we've already covered the fact that there's already been 3 times that the idea of using or saying that your wife is your sister so that you don't get killed has already been used 3 times. Mm-hmm. We've already seen that. What is it? There's like several brother
Rebecca
stories,
and Rachel,
Sarah,
yeah,
like the betrayal of brothers type stories, and it's just like, I mean, you see those myths throughout the world where there's always like a brother story in many cultures,
it's
but
just recycled plots from chapter to chapter.
within the time of like a small novel. So
you needed a developmental editor.
The one I always like is the one where he offers his wife and daughter to be raped instead of the angels or something.
Oh, that's Lot. That's
two
virgin daughters, not his wife, just the virgin girl.
Who, just a few verses later, are sad that they probably won't ever get married, so they get their father drunk and rape him.
Mm-hmm.
Which is totally plausible, because an old man in a cave could totally get it up while too drunk to be conscious. That's totally reasonable. Absolutely. Yeah, that's completely how bodies and medicine work. This was in no way total bullshit.
Yeah, another biblical claim.
And man, nothing gets me off more than like, God has just smited my entire culture. But I might not be able to get pregnant, so let's go
in a cave, with what the hell ever.
And my mom was just turned into a pillar of salt. But yeah, my concern is that I might not get pregnant.
But I want the babies. No.
I don't know if you guys ever watched The Atheist Experience or Talk Either. I can't remember which show this was on. But with the pillar of salt thing, there was somebody phoned in to say that he thought that was totally legit, because when we sweat, it tastes salty.
Totally legit. Wow, your logic is just inscrutable. Like,
yes. So we're basically made of carbon and hydrogen and oxygen with a bit of other stuff, but we can suddenly turn into a whole pillar of NaCl. It just
Also, like, was that really like the most creative thing God could have come up with? Like, I really feel like there could have been other things that could have happened. I don't know. like she all of a sudden flies up into outer space. That would be fun. Or, she gets beamed up by a UFO.
Oh no,
so many things that would be better.
Flew away. They had to make a whole mythology of Lilith about the first woman, because remember there's the like man and woman together, and then retcon woman is made as an accessory, the new black. So the myth is that Lilith was like, I'm not submitting to you, fuck you, and used the name of God as a magical charm and flew off and went off and had orgies with angels because they weren't such pussy bitches.
I've always been a fan of Lilith. I mean, just way better story.
Totally.
So if you guys have sort of done Genesis, then obviously you've done the flood story.
Yeah.
Yep, that was a few episodes ago. So our first episode, we recorded 2 episodes in our previous attempt to do the show, and that took, I think it was an hour and a half to do that show, and it was because we, of course, were very long-winded. Okay, I was long-winded. Crystal was better, but sorry, did you have a specific question about that one?
No, it's just I think of all the stories in the Bible, it's possibly the most ridiculous. And it's just the other day I was watching a debate with it was Erica against Standing for Truth. I'm hoping to have Erica on in a couple of weeks' time, and this guy was going on and on and on and on and on about genetics. And whenever these people do that, I just think to myself, but hold on, you going on about genetics, but what you actually believe is that the whole world was flooded and was repopulated by 8 people. Don't try and sound intelligent when you believe that sort of shit.
Well, and they don't know the first thing about genetics. They've invented these genetic restrictions and these like constantly fracturing and degrading genome concepts that have nothing to do with reality. All of these things have they've been completely disproven. All the creationist claims about genetics are demonstrably false. But most of the people they're selling this to don't have a degree in genetics.
Do you need one to know this? Do you need one?
No.
Well, that was...
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Genetics are fun because we just had the whole Jacob manipulating Laban with stealing his sheep, and he's like, he tells Laban, he's like, okay, well, I'll just take the striped and black sheep, you can keep the white sheep, that way you'll know that I didn't steal from you. So then he calls all of them off and then takes black and striped sheep and have them fuck in front of striped trees. And that is how they are born striped instead of white.
See, but he does at least use the correct rams to do this. I always figured it was like he just made it easier for the right rams to get, action. It doesn't
like,
make sense.
Like, look up Punnett squares. Like, read an elementary, textbook on Punnett squares, and just, if you fuck in front of a striped tree, you'll have striped baby sheep.
I told her, I was like, I forgot that story was in there. In fact, I don't think it was told very often for us, and so it was just very because it's in middle school. It's a 7th grade or whatever education that you should have to do that, to understand that. So
I think it's interesting you mentioned. I think it's interesting you mentioned the Punnett Square there, because there's an experiment here. What we could do is get somebody to fuck in front of a Punnett Square and see if they come out with all these sort of squares all over them with little A's and big A's. And...
Okay, somebody who's going for a baby, we need you to put Punnett Squares in your room. Just everywhere. All around, every direction. Do it for science.
And... Yeah, it's just kinky, I mean, and we found that God is really kinky too. So
yeah, but he doesn't use the safe word. That's not cool.
That's very true. Yeah, and God and yeah, dubious consent just throughout the
highly dubious, very
like,
dubious.
I will give you descendants if you all chop the heads of your penis off, because that makes sense.
Mm.
I've got a Jewish friend who told me that the reason that they get circumcised is that Jewish women won't accept anything unless it's 20% off.
Wow. Oh dear. 20%, that's a lot.
I just wish but we talk about where I was like, oh, who went back and thought about eating this particular thing? You know, I'm sure people think about it all the time, and why do we eat this, and how did this come about? But yeah, who was like, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm just so tired of my dick.
I'm just gonna
chop it off. And while it does have its benefits, we talk about that in the podcast. It has benefits to circumcision, but goddamn, why? Why that?
But it really doesn't not in modern society with
Not
soap.
in
modern society. Yeah, exactly.
Maybe at a time when there was no soap and next to no water. Maybe.
Exactly. But no, it's a myth that they perpetuate, and here in the US, that is still like the default. Like, it is very pushed to get your baby circumcised. Almost everyone is circumcised in America.
You're mutilating a child's genitals.
Yes.
Yeah.
Skin. There's like 10,000 nerves in that skin. Leave it alone.
Mm-hmm. Now, and it's so acceptable here, or accepted, that you'll hear women talk about the fact that like they wouldn't want to have sex with a man that's uncut. Which, if that's what culturally you're used to, is seeing a man that's uncut. But yeah, it's less pleasurable for the man. It has, all sorts of problems that can go on. And there are reasons to get the foreskin taken off and circumcised if it's like too tight and stuff. But yeah, you're right. It's a bodily, it's a bodily autonomy issue. And when we have kids, we're not planning on doing it.
Because we're feminists, and bodily autonomy is important. Not in the Bible, though.
Especially if it's in Texas, just be like, if they're like, oh, but you really should be like, if you cut him, I will cut you. And I will be drunk when I do it, so I will not be precise.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard horror stories
of circumcision
of moms who were like, they asked me 8 times in the hospital if I wanted to circumcise my baby. And I kept saying, and like, what? Why are you so concerned with my baby's penis? That's weird. But that's a weird way to make a promise. Like, I promise you this, and as evidence of this, you and all of your family and all of your slaves and all of your descendants have to snip.
And all of your slaves, too. Even the old men. It's like, you gotta think, even though, Isaac, the thing with Isaac giving his wife, that obviously was just a copy of the Abraham story. But if Isaac ever did exist, nobody's had a better reason to be totally fucked in the head than him. Because think about it. Your dad sends your older brother out into the wilderness to die. He's constantly wandering around randomly talking to God. He cuts the skin off your dick. Then he drags you up a mountain, ties you up, and is about to murder you until God tells him to stop, and he kills an animal instead. Yay. And then sends the servant off to get a wife for you. Far away.
Yep.
And then you're like...
Yeah, and you kind of understand the fact that, he's kind of fucked up in the head. And so he makes poor choices as well, and it's probably genetic, having those poor choices. Yeah, exactly.
Well, and just generally, that would mess a kid up. I'm just saying that that is your life growing up.
Yeah,
but Abraham is a great father figure. I mean, that is how he is. Like, like all of these great father figures in the Bible that we're taught about are horrible. You've got Jacob, who is like playing favorites because they were born of his favorite wife, and I'm like, this is not.
Yeah, but just the fact that that story alone Jacob should have gone to jail. In our society, he would have been put in a mental institution and tried for, child endangerment, all sorts of things that people would not stand for. People who are even the most vehement Christians would not stand for someone to do that if they're in the right mind. But no. And we talk about it a little bit because I remember it being compared to Jesus' story where, the sacrificial thing, like he was, obviously God being the father, having to sacrifice his son and going through with it, and the visuals there. And it's so beautiful of a story because he had so much faith, and it's just like, fuck no, it is not beautiful. This is not okay. So the abusive nature of everything that we've seen has been so terrible.
Well, and the reason is different, right? So when they draw those parallels, Jesus is supposed to die for salvation, which is a whole fucked up thing in itself. But Isaac was supposed to die to prove that Abraham loved God enough.
Yeah.
Narcissism.
Show me you love me. Kill your kid. Who was the comedian who did that? God is like a drunk girlfriend.
Was that Jim Jeffries?
I don't think it was Jim Jeffries, but it was someone very like that. He's like, Abraham, kill your kid. You don't love me.
Just a late night text, drunk texting God.
If you loved me, you'd do it. But it's okay. I'm just gonna go on record here. Human sacrifice is bad.
Absolutely
can't argue with you.
But Lilith, how do you know that? How are you grounding your morality?
In not being a complete cocksucking jackass.
And then later on, I don't remember where it's at, but there's also a portion where they talk about how the worshippers of Baal used to sacrifice their kids.
That was Molech, but honestly,
it was Molech. Okay,
that might have been a bit of projection on their part.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Is that then you have people, and it's like, well, this guy came pretty damn close, and I'm pretty sure he would have done it if it hadn't been for whatever voice talked to him. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Pass through the fire.
Fucking crazy.
Yeah.
To me, I get everybody's take on this, but to me, I can sort of disprove Christianity in a paragraph. Yeah. So we know scientifically there was no Adam and Eve.
Yep.
So therefore there was no original sin. So therefore there was no need for Jesus. Done.
Yep.
Boom.
The Bible says.
Also remember, geneticists whimsically called certain points of convergence in our ancestral history Y chromosomal Adam and mitochondrial Eve. And even though 20,000 years apart and way, way prior to anything that even the most twisted creationist mind could pretend was the Garden of Eden, that means there was really an Adam and Eve and Bible. So shut up.
Yeah, why do scientists do that?
Because they don't think that real, sane, educated adults could possibly believe anything so stupid. It's the same reason that the pictures with the Hubble telescope are called the Pillars of Creation or the Eye of God, because this one supernova looks like a giant eye and it's really cool. It's because it's poetic, whimsical reference to a cultural idiom, because they didn't realize for decades that there even were creationists. Like Kent Hovind was part of a whole generation that went around teaching kids that creationism was true by poisoning the well and teaching this ridiculous parody of evolution that bears no resemblance to the science. There's like a couple of stolen crossways terms, none of which ever mean the same thing. That's the closest relationship it has to it. It has less relationship to actual evolution than Pokemon. But they convinced people that that's what evolution was, that it was more ridiculous than Pokemon, so that the idea of a 6-day creation would be less ridiculous by comparison.
When I was talking to Jackson Wheat, I mentioned the fact that if they actually found a gene that was related to, muscle growth and hair growth, then would they call it the Samson gene?
Oh God, don't. Geneticists, I love you, but please not until people are sane.
So
after Hercules or something.
So coming back to the podcast, you don't have any episodes out yet, do you? Because I was actually looking for your podcast yesterday.
Oh, yeah, no, we've got...
You do?
We're about to hit our 200th download. We have six full-length episodes out.
And it's called Atheist Couples Devotional. Okay, so you've got a website and everything?
We don't have a website. But we're on Apple, Spotify, Google. I think we're finally on Google Podcasts. We're on Podcast Addict. Yeah, we've...
Okay, I'm going to have a bit more of a look because I tried with my podcast app yesterday and I couldn't find you.
What do you use?
I don't know, whatever one was on the phone. My wife does all that stuff. Okay.
Yeah, we're on like 8 or 9 of the big ones. And we're definitely on Apple and Spotify. So
I'm always looking for a podcast to listen to, so I'll do that. When you look at it, so Lilith was asking you, are you going for the WTF? Remember Morph is a family show, and I'm going to have to go and edit out all the bits about foreskins.
I'm so sorry. Oh, damn it.
I'm sorry.
Is it done? Is there a lot of giggling and laughing as you go through it?
There's a lot of laughing. Yeah, it's we laugh a lot. We are not family friendly at all. It's hard to talk about the Bible in a family friendly way because it's
maybe that's why they cherry pick, because they have to talk in front of kids, and there's only so many things in the Bible you can talk about in front of kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you do, and you just very much downplay all the incest.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God, the incest.
We could use the page numbers to teach them to count.
There you go. The Bible has a use. It would be better, but whatever.
Yeah, sorry about that. If we'd known, we would have been. It's kind of weird now that I think about it. It's sort of a skill that I acquired. I can now switch on and off my debauchery mode, I guess you could say. Or being at school and teaching, I rarely curse, if ever. And if I'm around people who I know will be offended, I don't curse. But I think some people have trouble switching it on and off. But I did it for so long that it's easy for me.
I call it the grandma mode. Things you would not say in front of your grandmother.
Yeah. Did you get the link I sent for the?
Yeah, that's our link tree. Links to all of the places that have our.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. Do you send that just on the DM, yeah?
On the private chat here on StreamYard. Yeah.
Or is that? Oh, tell you what, I'll do it in the live comments as well. Wait, never mind. Okay. We don't have that. Never mind. That's on us.
No.
Yeah. Sorry about that. You can bleep me. When I say what or
Yeah, it's, the whole idea with Morpheus, it's family friendly. So I had to edit out all the bits where Robert says he's going to push Frank Turek into moving traffic and all that sort of stuff.
He's not actually going to push anyone into traffic. Yeah, that's
sorry. We've watched a couple of episodes of yours, but yeah, sorry about that.
They're not family friendly at all. I was trying to say that just for giggles, really. Anyway, so you've said where people can find you. I'm going to go and try and do that as well. I spend a lot of time travelling backwards and forwards on my own in the car these days, and I'm always looking for good things to listen to, so I'm going to give a couple of episodes of yours a go. I might learn something about the Bible without having to ask Lilith every time.
Oh Oh, but
Sorry.
how will I live if you don't message me with Bible questions?
Yeah, well, that's true. So,
we were recently told on Instagram that the reason that we are seeing all of these fallacies is because this is a punishment reading of the Bible, and the first 3 times we read the Bible will be a punishment. The 4th time, God will speak to us. So a follower did tell us that.
Okay, so what's he going to say?
Penn Jillette, who reads the Bible every fucking year. Every year, Penn reads the Bible. He must have read the Bible at least a dozen times now. At least. Still thinks God is bullshit.
So I reckon that on the 4th time through, God's going to say to you, why the fuck do you keep reading this terrible book? You know, go and try something else by Asimov.
Yeah, so our plan eventually is to actually go and read other texts like the Quran and
Book of Mormon, Epic of Gilgamesh.
Yeah. So we've actually plotted out now. So you'll hear in one of our episodes that we figured out, and I thought we had done this before we actually started recording, that I thought I'd figured out that it would take us, X amount of time, but then we recalculated and realized at the pace we were going, it would have taken us over a decade to finish the Bible. And so we said, okay, we need to obviously speed things up.
So we're covering a lot more chapters in each episode, but we do give a chapter by chapter summary of everything. So
yeah. You could make it into a multi-generational enterprise, pass it down to kids and stuff.
And here's the family heirloom podcast. Mommy, Daddy, what's an MP3?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that'd be great. Okay. Well, this seems like we've got over an hour of recording, believe it or not. It's gone past. Wow. It's gone past like that. So I think this is probably an appropriate time to stop. I know Lilith's got to go and do other things. I've got a little time. Yeah, I've got a lot of online teaching today. So yeah, COVID has been good for me. I've got lessons all over the place in the UK and here in Australia, and that I do online. So yeah, it's been. Yeah, it's busy times, but I feel like I'm doing like 2 full-time jobs at the moment. This is my sort of hobby.
And you're in Australia, right?
Yeah. So I'm on the West Coast, though. We're the place where everybody's being sensible and we don't have any cases, and our government have closed the border and said nobody's coming here from over east or anywhere else. And I think they're talking about
the equivalent of Trumpistan.
It's not really, no. Nothing in Australia is that bad. It really isn't. So, and everything is done Australian style. I mean, I was trying to describe, where I lived to somebody the other day, and now this is not the common thing, but you go to the supermarket and you do see people in their pajamas barefoot. So
really common here.
Is that a common there as well? Australia is very, very laid back place.
Yeah, pajamas definitely. Yes. Barefoot in Dallas is gross.
Yeah. Which footy team? Do you watch footy?
Do you mean Australian rules football? Yeah, mm-hmm. I hate to say it, but I'm a Dockers fan, and they've been the strongest team the last couple of years. They've been at the bottom of the table, holding everybody else up.
Mm. I've been wanting to get into the sport, but the time difference is so difficult here that I don't have a way to watch it. I would have to watch it illegally online. So,
of course, you would never do that because you are a virtuous atheist.
No, yes, that's right.
100%.
Yeah, it's very hard to watch Australian rules on TV, I think, if you haven't actually seen a game live first.
Really?
Because a lot of what's happening is not what's on the television camera, because you've got to remember they play on a cricket oval. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the field's first of all not regulation. Everywhere you go, it's somewhere different. So if they're playing at the Gabba, they're playing on the Gabba cricket oval. If they play here in WA, they're playing on what's now the Optus Stadium cricket oval. And I mean, there are some stadiums that weren't used for cricket that we use for Aussie rules, but they're playing on this massive oval, and there's 18 players on each side, and a lot of what's happening is not happening on the ball, where the ball is. Everybody's running to patterns and things like that. I guess a bit like American football, where you've got the scrimmage, but then people are running patterns all downfield. It's the same sort of thing. Everybody's protecting their zone or running into to where they think there's going to be space and this sort of stuff. So there's so much happening off the ball that it really helps to see it first on the big oval, and then you can sort of understand what's going on the TV.
Okay.
Yeah.
Someday, if I ever get down to Australia, if we get down to Australia, that's one of my goals is to actually go and.
Yeah, but if you get over here to WA, which is not going to happen at least till at least 2021, because we've closed our borders to international travel, because we don't want any infected people coming in. And but if you ever get to WA, I'll take you to a game.
Oh,
all right,
appreciate it.
cool. All right. Well, thank you. This was a lot of fun. I can't believe over an hour has passed. So
Yeah, it was great meeting you.
Goes quickly.
Great meeting you.
And if I can,
are you on Twitter?
what I'll do is.
Are you on Twitter?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good.
Yeah. I'll put any links you send me in the description box of the video when I produce it.
okay,
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
And if there's a way to turn this into just audio, we'd be more than happy, I'm sure, to release this on our podcast stream.
Yeah.
That's great. I can easily do that, actually.
Okay.
I can easily send you the audio. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we'd love to stay in contact and do this again or whatever. So, well, at least I would. I can't speak for her, but
I
yeah.
No, I hate y'all. I never want to see you again.
What do you mean? Aren't you the man in the relationship? Aren't you supposed to be the head of the household?
Oh, I'm a Jezebel. Yes, we did get that on Instagram too, and he needs to become the head of the Yeah, he needs to become the head of the house, and I am clearly a Jezebel. So,
Yeah.
and I was like, and I said, "How did you learn my dominatrix name?" So,
the girl.
Yeah.
I did not give you permission to call me that.
Bad Fundy.
Yeah. Okay.
You could hit them.
So,
all right, y'all.
3, 2, 1. I'm going to stop. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
bye.